Hi, my name is Raj Sharma. I'm the managing partner of Stewart Sharma Harshani, one of Canada's largest dedicated immigration law firms. Today I'll be talking about the spousal sponsorship interview. I've talked in the past about preparing and submitting a spousal sponsorship application. These applications are relatively straightforward. There are some complications that may require legal representation or consultation. Once a positive decision is made on a sponsor's eligibility, the file is forwarded to a visa office to determine admissibility and to determine the genuineness of a relationship. If the documents submitted don't satisfy a visa officer's concerns, an interview may be held. The spousal sponsorship interview causes stress and anxiety for both the sponsor and the applicant. And I'm somewhat surprised at how often the applicant goes into this interview cold, without any preparation. In my opinion, the best antidote for stress and anxiety is preparation. The interview usually involves only the applicant, the sponsored person. If the interview is overseas, the sponsor may be called via telephone. There's no way I can tell you all of the questions that could be asked in a spousal sponsorship interview. This depends on the facts before the particular visa officer. Remember, principles remain the same, methods vary. The key is to think like an immigration officer. You've got to know the strengths and weaknesses of your own case. You can take this for granted. Questions will be asked about the origins and the development of the relationship itself. One issue I've seen over the years is haste, especially with arranged marriages from South Asia. If the sponsor and applicant met and married within a couple of days, that's sure to raise the visa officer's eyebrows. How did the sponsor and applicant come to make a life-altering decision within such a short period of time? The officer will want to know the decision-making process. And the explanation that you provide has to be cogent, reasonable, plausible, and ultimately credible. If the marriage is not in accordance with religious or cultural norms, be prepared for questions by an officer in that regard. Don't get your back up. Don't get offended. Explain how this seeming incompatibility is not an issue for you and your spouse. Perhaps point out if the officer is wrong in his or her assumptions as to cultural norms. The same issue occurs when there's a significant age difference between the couple. Personally, I think that an age difference between two consenting adults is a matter of personal choice and autonomy. That being said, be prepared to explain to the officer how this age difference was dealt with, whether it was an issue, and how it was resolved. This is very important. You will be asked knowledge questions, and frequently the applicant will be asked to talk about the sponsor's life in Canada. Now, these answers to these questions should be specific and detailed and shouldn't be vague and full of generalities. These questions could involve the sponsor's employment. It could involve knowledge questions about the sponsor's extended family, or their hobbies, or their finances. You should know what generally speaking, a genuine couple will know details of each other's lives, and you should be prepared to discuss your sponsor's life in Canada. In my experience, the decision often turns on the knowledge displayed by the applicant of the sponsor's life in Canada. Don't forget about contact. You will be asked about contact, ongoing contact since the marriage, and particularly since the sponsorship was submitted. So how you remain in contact with your sponsor, how often you remain in contact with your sponsor, all of these will be canvassed by the officer. It may be helpful if you bring with you evidence of ongoing communication. Return trips are always helpful, particularly where the processing times are lengthy. The applicant may be asked about the pre-marriage contact and relationship and behavior and activities, and will be asked about post-marriage behavior, outings, honeymoon, trips, things of that nature. A couple of points here. Be direct. Look the officer in the eye, and answer the question that's asked. Try not to guess. If you're gonna guess or approximate, tell the officer that you're guessing or you're speculating. Don't embellish your application. Don't try to strengthen your application by submitting false documentation. Do not lie. Do not take bad advice from people to do the same. Ultimately speaking, if the applicant or you are found to have made a misrepresentation, that finding of misrepresentation will put a roadblock of several years in coming to Canada to join your spouse here. Not only will you spend years apart, you'll also spend thousands of dollars on an immigration lawyer. Remember that certain issues are difficult to deal with. If the applicant has an extensive and negative immigration history in Canada, you're going to be behind the 8 ball, because the officer is going to think that the applicant's intentions are to come to Canada and not to be with the spouse. And so you really have to ensure that you have sufficient documentation and a very clear and cogent explanation as to the origins, development of the relationship and your commitment to each other to overcome a negative immigration history. Finally, if the application is refused after an interview, the sponsor has 30 days to file an appeal after receiving the negative decision here in Canada. Thanks for watching this video. For any question regarding immigration, please feel free to contact Stuart Sharma Harshani at www.sshlaw.ca or call us 403-705-3398.